You're saving diligently and you're earning a decent rate. And you're doing all the right things. So why does your money still feel like it's getting smaller every month? Today on the Wealth Guide podcast, we're going to unpack the invisible tax on your wealth, inflation, and showing how to structure your money so it actually grows and not quietly disappears. Hello everybody, welcome to episode 57 of the Wealth Guide podcast. Super excited. I feel actually really privileged today. We got the big hitters with us today. We've got David Boyle from Ascalon Capital. Thanks for joining us, David.
Thanks for inviting me.
He's so cool. We've got the lovely Ray Regmi. Everybody knows Ray.
Thank you, Mel.
Everybody loves Ray.
Everybody loves it.
That's it. And the beautiful, my fave, Ricky Regmi.
Oh, thanks, Mel.
That's it.
Good to be here.
Not everybody loves Ricky. Or...
No, it's true. It's true. I have a soft spot for Ricky in a special way. But the thing that we're going to talk about today, and the reason that we have David here is because it is your area of expertise, is we're going to talk about inflation. So not just inflation, but the real inflation, where your savings might be disappearing, the things that no one talks about, and what's all happening. So, you know, the invisible tax, all those kind of things. So this is an area where it's going to be an education for me because it's definitely something I'm not particularly knowledgeable about. No one laughing, please. So David, I know you've had a chance to have a look at it. Why don't you open up for us and talk to us about inflation?
Yeah, look, we'll start on the dry stuff, maybe the definitions about what's inflation, how do we measure it, and what are the different things that we think about with it. So at a very broad level, inflation measures the changes in price levels across an economy. And the key number that we look at, the Australian Bureau of Statistics calculates for us, is called the Consumer Price Index, or the CPI. That's probably the one that we hear about in the news, right? Inflation is really important for a couple of reasons. One of them is that when the Reserve Bank is setting interest rates and deciding whether interest rates need to go up or down, inflation is probably the key input into that decision for them.
Yeah.
The Reserve Bank is mandated to keep inflation between 2 to 3% per year. So what we saw coming out of COVID when inflation was very high, that was when the Reserve Bank needed to put interest rates up to get inflation back under control. And now that prices have started to come down again and inflation's dropping, that's allowed the Reserve Bank to make some cuts.
Yes, but we're not seeing a roll-on effect of that, and I think that's the reason that we want to talk to you today.
Absolutely.
Is whilst inflation's meant to be at its optimum at the minute, why we're not seeing it. So why we still feel like, you know, we're working harder, we're earning more money, but we're not seeing the roll-on effect.
Absolutely. And the other thing we should probably define here, right, is when we talk about inflation, what does that mean when we talk about things that are nominal and things that are real, right? So when we're talking about nominal prices, they're the prices that we see today, right? So we go down to the supermarket, we buy a litre of milk, it costs $1.60, that's a nominal price for it. When we talk about the real prices, for a litre, that's a Coles milk, right? $1.60 a litre, about?
Is it?
You've been out of touch.
I don't go grocery shopping. So.
Oh, right.
Well, Mel, Dave's not a politician, so please don't do price checks.
You can do the little fact check in a graphic way.
Let me get ChatGPT out.
Be on the front page.
You're out of touch, David.
Everyone's going to know what Coles you're shopping at.
Can I go there too, please?
It's a stuff near expiry, right? So it's discounted. But we look
Where
at.
do you live, David? I'm like, most importantly.
I'll pick up a lead if you want discount. That's fine, okay, right?
You get a few.
I'll drop them by your office.
We're all for a bargain here.
So they're the nominal prices, right? The things that we see every day, that's a nominal price. When we talk about real prices, and this is where it comes into our purchasing power and our investment returns, what we're doing is we're stripping out the effects of inflation, right, to understand what can our money really buy. So to give an example, right, if we buy a basket of groceries and it costs $100, which funnily...
You keep throwing out these low numbers. I want to know where you're going to get these baskets.
Well, no, Ricky and I were just down at the supermarket buying snacks for today, right? A few snacks and drinks, and
guys, thank you.
What I thought was a pretty modest collection of food was sort of pushing up around $100, right? So that was the nominal price that we paid for it today.
Yeah.
When we think about what inflation's done over the last year, so if we look at the last inflation reading that came out, the CPI was about 3.5%, right? There or thereabouts. So what that means is that $100, what that cost us today to buy, if we were to go back in time 12 months to where prices were then and looked at a representative basket of goods, not necessarily just groceries, but you think about an average of consumption across housing, electricity, food, education, healthcare, you name it, it would have only cost us $96.50 then, right? So effectively what's happened in the course of 12 months is that our money has become worth less. 3.5%
I did
less.
some research. 87 cents.
87 cents.
That's what I got out of the dollar
Over what time period?
in the current market. So
Right.
where you see the conversion at that 90, it's now like 87
Yeah.
or something.
Yeah, that's pretty
essentially
close,
the
yeah.
valuation of the currency. So it's
Yeah.
how your currency is devaluated over time. And
Yeah.
what's your currency's availability to purchase what it can purchase now.
Yeah.
Well, David, I thought it was my teenage son now eating more. So it's actually the inflation that I can't buy more. Is that what's happening?
Well, they're two different factors, right? One is that general prices are going up, and the other one is that your consumption bucket also sounds like it's increasing, right? If your son's smashing an extra loaf of bread, that's something that's out of control of what the policymakers and politicians can do to keep your prices under control, Ricky. That's on you, sadly, that one.
But household spending's going up, right? I think
It
something
is.
like 6% or 8% or something like that.
Yeah, and that's when we talk about inflation, there's more than one measure that we can look at, right? So the ABS uses CPI, and we know that, anecdotally at least, we know that it feels like prices have gone up a hell of a lot more than 3.5% over the last year, right?
Yeah.
And in fact, inflation's cumulative, right? Prices don't really drop. So we had the 3.5% this year, but that's been backed up by probably about 3 or 4 years now of elevated inflation. So if you go back about 5 years, we've probably had about 30% accumulated inflation in that time, and it compounds. It compounds on top of each other, right? And that's what becomes
And not
really
in a good
damaging.
way.
Not in a good way. Generally, when we talk about investing, compounding is a fantastic thing. We're building wealth on top of our wealth. With inflation, it's the exact reverse of that. We're getting savings tax on top of savings tax, right? That's what's going on there. Now, some alternative measures we look at, the ABS actually puts out something else called the LCI, the Living Cost Index. And that breaks it down. Yeah, that breaks it down in a more granular pattern to what different households are spending. And we can actually see that that's been running ahead of normal inflation over the last several years now. But to your point, Melissa, I mean, the other factor in it is that we sort of talked about what happened with prices, but the other thing that feeds into this is what's been happening with wages as well, right? And disposable incomes.
And I did want to ask about that.
Absolutely. So what we saw for most of the last 20 plus years is that wages growth was around, let's call it 4% per year, 3 to 4%. And inflation, prior to COVID at least, was running at a far lower number, sort of around 2%. Was actually even below the RBA target band a little bit, sub 2%.
You call that positive yield almost, right?
Yeah. So what was going on is that every year that went past, your wages were going up 4%, inflation was going up 2%. You had these little jaws opening up, right? Where every year, the real growth that you were getting, so the increase in your wages was 4, inflation was 2, your purchasing power was improving by about 2% every year because of that gap. Now, what happened after COVID was that went sharply into reverse. And it happened for a few reasons. One is that inflation went up. We all saw that. And the other thing that happened at the same time was that interest rates went up. That was a massive drain on household income. And we know that taxes have been going up as well. Or at the very least, they haven't been reduced. So that 2% real increase that we were enjoying year after year after year, that actually went into reverse, and at the absolute trough, we lost about 8 or 9% of our purchasing power.
Wow.
Our purchasing power dropped back to levels that were last seen in 2011.
So
Is that right?
Just on that, David, there's the inflation part, there's also the debasement of currency. Now,
Yes.
At what rate is the currency devaluating itself on a yearly basis? I'd love to know that. And obviously,
It's a
for
great
people obviously to understand what exactly is debasement of currency, you could explain that. But also, what rate is this currency now declining, and what is the trend that you're seeing in this debasement of currency?
So are we talking about versus the US dollar, or just generally the
Versus the US dollar?
Yeah. So if you've got a long memory, you know that the Australian dollar's had a wild ride. So if you go all the way back to 2000 at the peak of, just before the dot-com bust hit, the Australian dollar dropped below 50 US cents, right? It was about 47, 48 US cents.
Crazy.
In that subsequent period, what did we have? We had the China boom after that, right? We had the China boom, everyone was going mad for Australian resources, and the currency ran up. I remember I was in the US on holiday in about 2011 or 12. It was about $1.05, $1.10, right?
Yeah.
The Australian dollar.
doing really well.
Oh, absolutely! It was unbelievably cheap. We were staying at the Venetian, and we were paying the equivalent of about 60 Aussie dollars a night, right, to stay at one of the best hotels in Vegas. It was amazing.
I've left it way too late to start travelling.
Never too late.
I'm doing it, but I'm going to be paying a premium for it.
But anyway, at that point, it had sort of peaked up to $1.10. There were more adjustments in the global markets, and it had recently dropped down to about the 60 mark again, and we've bounced back up to about 66 now. And there's always a lot of complex factors when it comes to predicting where the currency is going to go, right? It's probably one of the hardest things to do in financial markets, and not many people have been able to do it successfully. But one of the big things that causes it is an interest rate differential. So the difference between interest rates in different countries will drive the currency. And the other thing that's been happening in recent years, as you alluded to, Ray, was there's been a lot of money created. There's been a lot of money printed around the world. During COVID and before that, during the global financial crisis in 2007 and 2008, we started doing this, and we cut interest rates as low as we could. And when that stopped working and the financial system was still seizing up, we started to do this thing called quantitative easing, QE. And QE is just a fancy way of saying start the money printers, get more money out there, try and get people spending, try and get the economy rolling, try and get people investing because money's cheap. Now, there was a couple of times where QE was tried to be wound back. So we saw the money supply do this, it really edged up. They'd sometimes try and take it back a bit, but the markets would panic, and then they'd stop doing that, and then it would start going up again and up again. And it really expanded again during COVID.
So is that when we got the $900 per household during
Exactly.
COVID?
Yeah, so essentially it's government printing more and more money just to
That's
flow out
right.
of the economy and pretty much restarting it all again.
Yeah.
But what it actually does is actually worse for you.
And we're still dealing with the hangover of that, right? The
And that's
government
what I
massively overstimulated during the COVID pandemic, right?
And is that that leads into the question I was about to ask, and I think you might have just answered it, which is, all of these things that you're talking about are all historical and they all have a roll-on effect. But is that the why where we're in the economy that we're in right now, but things still feel really expensive? And is that the why?
If you're asking why there was inflation, it depends who you ask. If you ask the politicians, they'll say it absolutely wasn't their fault. It was all about the Russia and Ukraine situation, and for sure that contributed. But you can't deny that the massive amount of stimulus that occurred and is still occurring.
It's got to be paid back at some point.
And is still occurring, right? There are huge budget deficits in the US, all through Europe. Australia's doing a bit better because we're doing well out of commodities, and tax receipts are very high at the moment. But we still have a very stimulatory environment, and that is keeping inflation elevated.
Is
in
it
many
then
cases.
very irresponsible of the government to do that? Because it is the crash we need to have to correct things out? Or is it the right thing to do, just keep printing money and just inflate this balloon?
Well, that's interesting language you use there, because the last time we talked about something that we had to have, that was Paul Keating and his recession. And that did not end very well for Paul Keating, and I doubt that many politicians today would be keen to repeat that mistake.
But that's what's happening, right? People are losing trust in the US market, and hence the gold surge that we've seen recently, that's just all coming in.
And you could say that for asset prices in generally. I mean, you look at gold, you look at the stock market, which is trading at reasonably elevated levels at the moment. Housing prices are through the roof, which everyone would be well aware of. There's too much money chasing too few things, and that's one of the things that will cause inflation in assets and in prices.
Yeah, I rewind a memory from a couple of years ago. My sister-in-law and I having a debate with my father-in-law, God bless, and he's a very educated, he's an intelligent young man. I'll call him. He is. I love my father-in-law. He's an intelligent young man. And with that said, though, he was just saying how, with the incomes that you guys all earn, you should be having this and this and this and this. And we had the debate about the fact that whilst he worked really hard his whole life as a storeman and a truck driver, and my mother-in-law worked really hard as a seamstress and a kitchen hand, and they own their home outright and they've got their savings, we just couldn't find that meeting of the mind, that they couldn't grasp that their ability to create wealth, with all the reasons that we've just said, is so much more achievable than in the world that we live in. Like, as hard as we work, it's not as achievable as easily.
But the monetary policy was so completely different back then, because you had gold standards. Your money was linked back to the gold.
Yeah.
If you look at fast forward now, it's completely different. And as previously David alluded to, we've printed so much money.
Yeah.
The asset purchasing power does not exist anymore. So
Yeah.
There's
So,
still
but
a
he couldn't just sort of
section, right?
grasp that, you know, that his 30 grand a year versus our whatever we earn a year, that variation is just such vastly different. And I guess, and that leads into my next question, and I'd love an education from all of you around the phrasing, the bracket creep. Oh, okay. It sounds very obvious.
Well, it's interesting, isn't it, bracket creep? Because if you think about it, if you're on a salary and you're getting, as we were talking about before, if your salary is just going 2-3% up every year,
Yeah.
so that's getting indexed every year. However, our tax bracket don't get indexed.
Yeah.
Right? So our tax bracket remain the same as they are.
Yeah.
Which leads to the point, like slowly in 2-3 years'
Just
time.
like hidden revenue for the government.
It is indeed, because
Yeah.
because of the tax brackets remain the same as they are, over 3-4 year period of time, you might find that the clients actually move into the next tax bracket.
Yeah.
So they're
And sometimes you've got to be careful, right? Getting a pay rise, is it a benefit really?
it could be worse.
That's right.
Yeah.
And if you are getting a pay rise and it does creep you over that tax bracket, do you then start talking to, you know, I'm going to say a little bit of a spiel now for financial planning, but do you start talking about a financial planner and look at tax optimization?
Absolutely.
That you can still earn that income, but then mitigate it in different ways so that you can put it into a nest egg like your super and things like that that will keep you down a tax
And
bracket.
these are some of the common strategies, Mel, we've talked to clients about, because I think it's important to keep in mind that what you don't want to do is keep going through that working life and keep paying those taxes the way you're paying.
Yeah.
You should have some sort of sound tax strategy to sort of build your wealth on how to build wealth. So you can't just go, I'm doing this purely for tax minimisation, because that's tax avoidance.
Yep.
So it's got to be about wealth first, to go, how do I build wealth?
Yeah.
By optimising my tax at the same time.
Yeah.
But you're right, the bracket creep, I call it the inflation sneaky mate that no one invited to, but showed up anyway.
No, so I was researching about it and I was sort of looking, it's like, you know, our earnings are getting inflated, but our cost of living is not.
Well, that's another way that our disposable income's getting stolen, right? Because you think about it and you say, well, you're feeling good because you've got a 10% pay rise this year. Let's say that. I'm not sure that's standard for you guys, right? You know, 10% rolling through every year.
I have a meeting with Ray and Ricky next week.
It's a deflation, by the way. That's in the expenses.
Call it negative inflation. It sounds better. But
It was really nice to know you, David.
But what we find, right, is like what happens to that 10%? We go, oh, beauty, I'm only, only 100,000. I'll get you another $10,000 now, and then you say, well, it's not that simple, because my average tax rate's likely gone up. If I've jumped into the next bracket, I'm paying a bit more tax, and if inflation's running at 10% and I've got a 10% pay rise, those things aren't matching off, because I'm getting incrementally more tax taken out now.
Yeah.
And the governments won't do anything to stop it, because they love building up that little war chest every election so they can hand us back some of the money we kindly pay them, right?
Yeah.
So
Unless you speak to Ricky or Ray or the Riker team, and they'll give you a different strategy.
Well, just before coming for this, so that's why I was looking at the savings by age. I was doing a bit of research, and this Westpac data from January 25. So 35 to 44 year olds, my age bracket, median saving is $800.
wow.
What?
That's staggering.
Per what frequency?
On average, 35 to 44 age bracket.
Sits in your savings
Yeah,
account.
that's their saving balance. That's just amazing, isn't it? Like, it's just the effect of
You talk
inflation.
about living week to week on a 6-figure salary, right?
That's right. It's just amazing.
Well, a lot of people are obviously using their parents as a quasi bank account, aren't they? If things
I know
get
my
really
kids
bad,
do.
yeah.
Bank of mum and dad, right? So,
They're
you know,
like a mum and
But
dad.
that's how-
The money grows in trees, right?
Yes.
But that's having effect on mum and dad, because their retirement's getting affected, because they've got to start planning
course.
for it as well.
Of course.
And it does have that sort of flow-on effect with parents, and this is where you sort of find something. I feel like going the generation further getting poorer and poorer as a result.
So can I ask you then, with all the things that we're speaking about, what are the benefits of, you know, cashes, that's very bad English. What are the benefits of cash
Yeah.
and keeping that saved, you know, under your bed versus, or putting it in your bank account, because it's that whole, again, you know, dopamine effect. If you see your savings grow, not your generation clearly,
Like TikToks.
but you see your savings grow. But then again, what's that versus, say, investing? And in the topic of what we're talking about, what makes most sense?
I'm like, if you look at the cash rate, I'm like, what are you getting now? 4%.
About that.
People are going, hey, that's a great rate.
Right.
But if you think about if you look at the average person's marginal tax rate of 34.5%, the actual real rate of return is 3%.
Yeah.
Right? And then if you go, hang on a second, I've got the inflation at 3.5, I'm negative. So my purchasing power is diminishing
Yeah.
very quickly.
That's right.
Whilst it's tangible and good to look at and I get great happiness and joy out of it, but it's not really adding value to me.
Yeah, we do see that.
Because the inflation's sitting at 7, I'm like, it's decreasing at a rapid level.
You see that with our clients, don't we, Ray? Like if you would see clients, especially retirees, they want to have that feeling of cash
Oh, 100%.
and the term deposit.
Yeah.
Right? They go, I'm too worried about the share market and what
It's
it can
tangible.
do.
They can touch it,
Yeah,
feel it.
I've got the money available, but the cash doesn't give them the return that they need. And when we factor inflation,
Yeah.
you really are going backwards.
Yeah, but
Yeah.
newsflash, even the cash isn't safe.
No.
Because it's losing its proprietary value.
Yeah, so what's more risky, would you say, in today's world? Having cash in the bank or investing it?
Well, I think investing always going to be the right solution. Look, you always got to have your safety buffer in a sense that you want to make sure there is a money in there that I can always reach to if my kids are sick, if I need the emergency stash of cash.
Yeah.
That's got to be there. But besides that, everything should be invested. And if it's invested in the right way and with the right allocations and the right structure, even when you have the volatility of the market, long term you're faring out really well. At least
Yeah.
you're averaging out about 8.5%, 9% of a high grade fund, which is still keeping up with inflation above.
Well, can we actually take a little bit of a step back there and say, well, what is risk?
Yeah,
And what does risk mean for your
I'm
clients?
so glad you're here.
Is risk seeing the value of an investment sort of move up and down over time a little bit? Or is it something else? Is it the fact that, is risk really the chance that you don't meet your objectives? Because that's how I think about risk.
And I think, look, if you look at it from a customer's perspective, the way they look at risk is going, and we used to do this on a daily basis, is going, oh, I've just lost, I had $100,000 there today, now it's all of a sudden $85,000, right? I have just lost $15,000.
Yeah.
What's going on?
But you know, it's interesting that you say that, because if someone did that in property, they're going to think that, but they're not going to sell it.
Exactly.
But if they have a share or an investment, they're like, oh, I've got to dip out, rather than riding out the storm.
And this comes back to the logic around what's tangible and what's non-tangible for people.
Yeah.
I'm like, property, I can see it touch and go, well, it's not going anywhere, so I'm going to leave it.
Yeah.
But it's like the flip side of the stock market going, well, I can't see this, and I can't touch this, and I don't know what the hell you're doing, so I'm going to catch it, thank you very much.
But again, as I said to you, this is an area that's, unfamiliar territory for me as far as to talk about intelligently. But would I be wrong to say that when you have an investment, you don't have to service that investment, it sits there and it does its own business, but whereas when you have a home, as we just said, if you have a home that's gone down in value, you don't sit there and sell it, you've still got to service it. One has a much more tangible outgoing that is like effectively not as good, and it's much more risky than, say, sitting in an investment and just leaving it sit there. Am I correct to say that?
Yes, you're right, because obviously your holding costs on any of the tangible assets, if I think specifically property or commercial assets, you've got your variety of different ongoing costs. So if I'm purchasing a property for $1 million, and again, I'm not dissing property because I own investment property, so again, it all depends on the asset, where and how you bought it and when you bought it, sort of thing. But if I purchased a property for $1 million and I've invested that, bank lends me money at 5%, which is about $50,000 in interest. I've got to pay the rates, I've got to pay the water, I've got to pay the insurance, I've got to pay the agent fees, there's capital works, there's ad hoc cost that comes out of it.
Maintenance.
So if I add all of that cost over the period of time, it's about, let's just say, $65,000 in a year. I'll pro-rata it for 10 years, I'll dish out about $550,000. Now the growth in that 10 years, let's just say, hypothetically, it's about $1 million. So realistically, what I made out of that is about roughly 450.
Yep.
And if I was to go sell it, Anthony Albanese would go, give me CGT. Sorry. Hopefully AT doesn't come after me.
And it's not easy to sell as well, right? It's not just as a property you can go, I want to cash it. You've got to wait, it takes time, so it's not really
Not
really
my
good
neighbour.
asset.
Cost on that as well,
Yeah.
because obviously there's the real estate agents fees and
Absolutely.
And liquidity as well, right?
And liquidity.
You can't just sell 10% of your house, it's
Yes.
all or
I
nothing.
can't stagger my CGT,
Yeah.
if you like.
Oh,
Yeah.
really?
Yeah.
No, I feel like I can actually sell off part. We were going to build a second story recently, and I thought, you know what, I'm going to wait. My kids are at that age, can't afford to buy anything. In 5 years, they're going to need a house, and I'm going to go, you can pay for the second story. So I feel like I'm selling off part of my house. But
You'll enjoy that, right? Keep the kids around, have
I
the
love
same
it.
story as the granny
It's
flat,
literally I will end up in the granny flat. They will push me out. My daughter told me the other day that she will put me in a trunk and help people look for me.
Something to look forward to.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. But I mean, the reality is, if we have a big aging population and all the bits that go with it, and we're talking about inflation, all the bits. But the reality is, people feel safe with cash.
Yeah.
So how do we then educate that mindset, or how do we adjust that? And is there a way?
Well, look, if you really look at it, again, so I was looking at AFCA, so Australian Super Association. They've put out a research like how much do you really need in retirement to have a comfortable lifestyle, which is about 70, 80 grand for a couple and about just under 60 or 50 grand for single, right? Now, and then in order to have how much asset do you need to back that, right? So it's about, for a single, you need to have about just under $600,000. That's assuming you paid off your home loan.
That's equity, obviously.
That's right. So that's not including your home. This is your assets you've got, investable assets.
Right. Oh, okay.
Right. And then if you look at the same time, this is ATO data, from 55 to 59 age bracket, females have an average super balance of 236,000. And to have a comfortable retirement, you need just under 600,000.
But how much do men have? I want to know.
Well, I was getting to it. Thank you. Male have just...
Don't get me started.
Just under 320,000.
Why don't you guys get more?
Well, just with females, it tends to be because there's leave and because having to look after the family. Females tend to take
See, we
mat
should
leave,
get
working
remunerated
part-time.
more on super for that.
And I think, look, there's also things where we sort of utilise some of the catch-up provisions to sort of equalise that gap. And I think this is a big part of what we do in RICA is to sort of go, well, how do we look at things in a way where we equalise this gap where some of the catch-up contributions that they've missed out on over that period of time, how do we sort of bring them to that level with the male counterparts, so they are sort of equal to that level. And we want to make sure that their retirement is very well healthy and looked after pretty well.
And so, we look at all the different things that we're talking about, and, we've got different levels of super. It's a whole other conversation. Inflation, all the bits, people having more confidence with their money sitting here and there, and all the different parts of it. Like, how do we combat all of that as a whole? Like, what do you need to hold on to? How do you do it? How do you plan for outflows? All those things that you're talking about.
So if we're talking about what assets can act as the inflation busters, I suppose. I mean, we're lucky with financial markets.
You've got the best phrases, I just want to tell you.
Thank you. I don't even have that one written down on my notes. That was made up on the spot. But we've got a good thing about financial markets. We've got lots of data, lots of history that we can look at, right? And we know that, and Ray alluded to this point, with equities, Australian or US equities, if we look back over the last 100 years, and even little sub-periods within those 100 years, in real terms, so we're ignoring the effects of inflation, stripping out the effects of inflation, and that has gone up and down over the years. It was very high in the 70s and 80s, for example. Stock markets have returned about 6% in real terms. 6%. And that's got to be a key plank of a strategy to get ahead of inflation. We can look at things like infrastructure as well. That's another interesting way to get on top of inflation. Things like funds of toll roads or water processing or electricity lines.
But how safe are they, David? Like some of the infrastructure assets that haven't had the good track record over the years. And sometimes being very sceptical of these infrastructure assets and the ongoing costs that have been associated with it. I know some of the unlisted assets have been sort of sitting, they're having a terrible time at the moment.
Oh, look, and this is where I have to sort of spruik myself and say, where you need the expert insight sometimes, because you often get a couple of things right. You get a bit of definition creep with what's infrastructure. So I was, back in 2007, before the global financial crisis hit, I was working for a fund that was dealing in higher yield infrastructure debt, and the scope had crept out so much, people were considering lotteries as infrastructure.
I'm all for it.
Lotteries were considered as infrastructure because they were sort of government related, pretty stable returns, and there's some of the assets that got into trouble. Something else that gets these assets into trouble is leverage. Because people perceive them as being pretty safe, they'll stack a whole lot of debt around them, and if you get regulatory changes, like you often do in some jurisdictions, I mean it's been happening in France with the toll roads, that can really impair the value as well. But like all things with investments, I mean they always say that the only free lunch you get in investing is diversification.
It's my favourite word, diversification. I talk it every day.
Me too. It's one of my most used words.
Anyone who knows me knows that apart from I am awesome, the other word that I use is diversification.
So what we try and do, Ray, is we'll find funds that actually do have that wonderful spread of assets, different asset classes, different geographies, conservative gearing, hopefully a team that's been doing it for 10 or 20 years that have seen different cycles. And the reason infrastructure can be helpful is that it's often legislated that it will have inflation pass-throughs. That's another way to do it. And really the things you want to avoid are things that have fixed or no payments, right?
Yeah.
So we know that cash under the bed, that's almost the worst thing you can do. That's just getting worth less and less by the day. Or if we're looking at bonds, for example, something that people would typically consider safe, if we're looking at fixed coupon bonds that pay a guaranteed amount each time over a fixed rate, they'll often go down in value if there's high inflation.
Yeah.
But on the other hand, floating rate bonds, they should keep up.
Right.
So there are ways to get around it.
So what are the key, when you're looking at these key infrastructure assets that you guys invest in, what are the sort of key indicators that you look for these infrastructure assets, and how do you make sure that you're constantly evaluating them and ensuring that they're not going bad?
Yep. The universe of investable assets is ridiculously large, right? There's literally, even in infrastructure, there are thousands of things that you can be investing in. In the broader stock market, it probably gets into at least tens of thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of stocks that you could look at. So we decide when it's time that we can do it ourselves with our own expertise, or we find someone that we trust to do it for us.
Yeah.
So we'll look for a manager that has that expertise, that has that global coverage, it has people sitting all around the world, and they're keeping on top of those assets and they're monitoring those issues like the gearing, like the regulatory risk. They're the key things that can hurt infrastructure, and we want to make sure that when we engage people to look at infrastructure assets for us, they're the things that they're ticking off as well.
Nice.
Beautiful, beautiful. And you know what, like what I'm taking out of that is inflation's going, it's here to stay. It's going to be what it is. You can try and save harder, but I think really what I'm taking out of today is you've just got to structure harder, like structure smarter. Is what I'm taking out of it. But then, we talk about all these different things, and I think that money is definitely, whilst it's financial, it's definitely very emotional. And it's that psychology and what makes people feel safe, what risk people want to take, and it's different for every person. So, can we just talk about the especially to you guys, because you actually sit there, and I know you've been a financial planner as well, David. When you sit with people and you're going through their financial plan and their forward thinking and their goals and aspirations, the amount of emotions that must get unpacked with that, I can't begin to imagine what you see and hear.
Massive. Look, I think money brings out different form of emotions to different people, and it means different things to different people. So it doesn't necessarily what it means to me would be
correct.
you or to yourself. For some people, it's means to an end, and I think they've got bigger things in life that sort of find a value in. But essentially, when we talk about money, I think we start with the part to go, well, what does money really mean to you?
Yeah.
What is that you're trying to achieve out of this money, whether it's long-term retirement? You want to make sure that you don't outlive your money, and if that's your key goal and objective, how do we diversify that? How do we look at ways to sort of add another layer of income? What does security mean to you? So there's a vast range of things that we sort of go to for that emotive side of money.
Yeah.
And once we sort of gather that part of the process, I think it's also changing behaviour of the money, because people have sort of been embedded with their parents about their discipline of money, and they carry that part from their parents. I know I certainly did with my parents. So for us, we never sort of grew up to go, we got to invest in shares. And as we sort of fell into that part of the occupation, we go, well, this
It would have freaked your parents out, surely.
Yeah.
Because if you can't visibly see it, is it real?
Yeah, exactly. I'm like, if I talk to my parents about investing, go, no, it's going to cash and term deposit.
Right.
I'm going, Dad, do it.
But behaviour with money is such a thing, right? Like you can't have enough money. Right? There's people always.
No argument. It's good. There you go. No argument from me.
That's right. So there's no amount of money is enough for anyone really, if you put in that term. But people, when we look at working with their clients, because especially with the retirees, right? They've finished working, they've accumulated the money that they have, so you can understand where it's coming from. They want to preserve it, they want to utilise it, they want to do the best they can. So that's where education comes in very handy, where you do have to tell the client, let's look at investing, let's look at meeting the above inflation return, so your money is keeping above, it's keeping up with the value.
Not only that, the longevity is the key thing for them.
People are living longer, and more important, they want to give the money to their kids as well.
Yeah, and they've got different purpose. They want to be philanthropic. They want to sort of give the money to charity purposes. They've got purpose that's closer to their heart. So,
Absolutely.
Yeah. And look, I think the reality out of it is, like, just rattling off, I know you did your research, I did mine as well, just so you know. Some snapshot of some data, right? So CPI, and I know we've touched on some of these, is 3.4%. Real wage growth is roughly 1.2% as opposed to what it used to be, which is scary. household electricity has gone up over 11%. Private health insurance is nearing 10%. Car insurance premiums are double digits, you know, and then real household purchasing power has gone down because there's less houses, more people, that kind of thing. So even if your income is increasing, your lifestyle is still going backwards. So really what I take out of that is it's all about behaviour, planning, tools to stay ahead. And the key word that you've used, my favourite word, diversifying, and feeling confident in doing that. And it's, you know, I feel like, you know, people need to get around people like yourselves to really start doing that. And I guess the question is how do you talk to someone who's not confident in that area and give them that peace of mind? This journey is a place to go.
I think we start with the current asset position. So we really do a deep analysis to go, right, you've got an investment property, what it's doing, what is yielding. So which means if we had this investable asset in a different format, what would it have done and what would it have received? Should we pivot the strategy? Should we pivot by, like you said, your favourite word, diversification, into different structures? Depending on the risk appetite that suits them, you don't necessarily need to go full blown in shares, and you can sort of work out this risk profiling based on what their appetite needs would be, depending on what the yields they're after. So essentially you do need to sort of work with an individual based upon their risk appetite, how they sort of wish to grow their wealth, and sort of, again, unlearning that behaviour they've learned and then starting all over again.
That's the big challenge, right?
That's a massive challenge.
It's like a change management process in a business. There's, you know, 7 emotions that come with
But
it.
it's either that before or after. So it's either if you continue on this trend, this is what your future looks like, because that's what you've done for the last 5-10 years. Or if you do Y, this is what it looks like. So the before and after plays a key part.
It's all about balancing, isn't it? Like you go, well, this is the amount of money that you have coming in. You can't control that, right? That's how much you're getting. So you talk to client about really prioritizing. Like, you know, everything's important. You know, we can't have holidays, 2-3 holidays in a year if you also want to buy a house. So you prioritize what's important. So, and then we create a strategy based on that, on the cash flow, because you should always have some money, 20% of your money saved up into, you know, possibly investing that money.
Yeah, so like talking about tools and investing and bits and pieces, like let's talk about obviously inflation, as we just said before, it's here to stay, and it's a word that unfortunately there is no quick answer for it, right? But what are the tools that we have that we can work around to sort of offset that? So we've got things like super and bits and pieces. Like in your world of what you guys do, what are the tools that we can use?
I want to be careful. Like inflation is also a necessary tool.
Of course.
Right. So it's the both levers that the government do need to pull sometimes.
But the imbalance of it should be very clear. It's the imbalance of
so
inflation.
Inflation is a necessary tool as to how sort of government pulls some kind of market. So you do need that part.
Yeah, but what tools would you use for people? So, you know, we're in that negative sort of position right now. How can we then combat that, as I used before? And what tools can we use? So, for example, I know that I hear you guys talking to people a lot about putting extra money in super and lump sums and, you know, shifting their balance from different areas.
Yeah.
So I think that one of the tools that we look at is going, well, if you're going to invest in an asset, what tax benefit does it give me? Again, look, it's not a strategy recommendation to anyone. So when I sort of look at the strategies for a retiree is closing to retirement, and there might be potential benefit for transition to retirement. Where what we do is we look at how old they are in around May and June, and this is some of the common strategies that we use for our clients. In May and June, we'll go, right, okay, Mr. Client Joe, you earned about $160,000. You paid a tax of $45,000. What we're going to do is we're going to use some of the catch-up provision or the money that you haven't contributed over a period of time. We're going to use $20,000 of that to make a contribution because you've got X amount of surplus cash flow. Now, that 20% is going to give you and again, I'm just going to say a hypothetical number here, it's going to give you $8,000, $9,000 as tax refund. Now, that's great because not only you're investing, you're paying yourself.
Yeah.
And getting that tax refund.
Yeah, and you're getting compounding growth on it as well.
And compounding growth. And you keep doing that behaviour over a certain period of time, depending again on government rules and policies, now you see a substantial level of growth over a period of time. So it's not just about the growth, but it's also having the appropriate tax strategies underneath.
Yeah, but we'd also to be looking at your super as well and like how it's mixed up.
That is true, because I think, and that's the key aspect. There's about hundreds of different super funds that exist in Australia, and I think the key aspect of that is how's that super governed, how's that performing, what are the underlying assets that I'm invested in?
Yeah.
Is it adding value to what I want to do?
Correct.
And if it's not, and I think I've never been loyal to any product, I've been loyal to essentially to my clients as what they want and their yield.
That is loyalty at its finest,
Yeah,
just
100%.
FYI.
Ultimately, our client pays us to sort of do the right thing for them, and that's our job.
All what we do is very personal, so
Exactly.
everything we do has to have best interests, and you'd want it to.
Exactly. And
Absolutely.
some clients will have different values to go, well, I want to make sure that it's ethically invested and
Yeah.
have the right structures, which is quite a growing topic, I believe. That, and I think you're sort of seeing a lot of growth in the ESG side.
Look, it has tailed off a little bit. There was a lot of interest sort of around 21, 22 on the ESG side. It's tapered off a little bit now because, sadly, because of various policy issues, particularly coming out of the US at the moment, investment in that sort of those sorts of assets has been curtailed a little bit, so returns aren't too good. But it gets back to that holistic idea about what do you want to achieve, what are your goals. The actual investments that you have underneath it, they're the end piece, right?
Yeah.
That's a culmination of all the work that you're doing, Ray and Ricky, to work out what the big picture is for these guys and what they want to achieve in terms of their lifestyle and in terms of the values that they might want to have reflected in their investments as well.
Yeah,
That's
absolutely.
what I'm trying to work when we work with a client, and I love this saying, like Rome was not built in a day.
Yeah.
Right, so when you're sitting with the clients, that's what you're trying to teach them. Like, look, these are the small steps we've got to take over a period of time,
Yeah.
and that's when you
It's a
see the
journey.
growth. It's a journey. It's not immediate gratification. Doesn't happen with money, right? So you've got to have a plan, you've got to have a strategy, and you've got to stick to it. Discipline's probably another big one when it
Yeah.
comes to it.
Absolutely.
Absolutely. All right. Well, does anyone else have anything they want to add to this particular subject for today or anything? I mean, you're full of wisdom, David. You could probably talk to us for days about this stuff.
I'd like to finish with some numbers that I think maybe will scare people a little bit when we think about inflation. Right?
Okay, hang on. Let me hold my
So,
drink. One sec. I'm ready.
so we talked about inflation being 3.5% in the last year, right? And that's not great, but it might not be too terrifying if you think about that. But it does add up and it does compound. So $100 today, you could have got the same with $96.50 a year ago. Let's look at a slightly longer time frame now and just really get our heads around what the impact is. If we wind all the way back to year 2000, right? 25 years, Sydney Olympics, new millennium, PlayStation 2 came out, it was a big year, right?
I remember that only too well.
So if we do that same exercise now and say that the basket of goods that cost us $100 today, what would that cost us in 2000?
$60 maybe?
Pretty close.
55.
Getting closer. Come on, it's all yours
47.
now. You could have just said 50 and you would have been right.
Oh, okay. I was still the
Was it
closest. I was still the closest.
You're still the close. So it's about $50. So the value of that, $100 note, that you had in your pocket in, 2000, you could have bought twice the amount with that you could have bought today.
This is my point. Can you
Yeah.
please come to my Sunday lunch with my father-in-law?
I'd be delighted. Are you cooking?
I will.
Yeah, sold. And one last one, right? So this is where it gets really terrifying. Most people aren't thinking about this sort of time frame, but what if we do the same exercise over 100 years?
Yeah.
And we wind all the way back to 1925 here. That $100 worth of goods, what would that have cost 100 years ago? And
Well, you
you
could
have
have
to
bought a
go,
house for $100 probably.
well, you have to go first because you went last time. What's your guess on how many dollars?
Okay. I'm going to say $17.60.
Okay, second guess?
Well, I was
that
gonna
was
say-
a bit high. Since I gave you guys a hint, that's a bit high. Yeah.
Oh, okay.
$12.
Oh, you were...
Still a bit high.
Why did you
I'd
give
say
them a
about
hint for?
$2. Over
Wow.
the last 100 years, the value of your money has decreased by 98%.
I give up now.
This is why we're talking about inflation today and why it's so important. That's a note
But
that I'll
on the
end
flip
on.
side, look at the future forward that.
Hmm.
And if you don't have the right strategies now,
It'll happen again.
it will happen again.
Yep.
Yeah. It's just going to continue compounding and growing and all the bits that go with it, which I think that's a message that you're trying to convey.
Absolutely. And the flip side of that is if we're smart about investments and we invest in things that are only above the rate of inflation, we get to enjoy the benefit of that
But
compounding.
no,
not be
I
penalised
just look at
by-
the purchasing power of what my money buys now in terms of stocks.
Yes.
That's devaluated massively.
Yes, it has. Absolutely.
Because the creep is massive.
Yep.
Mm.
No, you're right.
Okay. Well, thank you for that. I want to go back to 1901. I quite like riding a horse. But look, I guess what I would say is out of today, the things that I've taken away is if I could just circle it back to us at Riker and what we would do, and we're talking to our clients and we talk about, inflation and the hidden things and all the bits that everyone's scared about, is just have that clarity, audit all your things, you know, whether it's your return, your all the bits and pieces, have some structure. So as you said before, I can't remember which one of you, Regmi, it was that said it, but just separate your cash, you know, from your investments, and make sure you have a bit more things going on. And then that purpose. So make sure you know what you're doing with your dollar, be safe, protect it, make sure you have income growth and that flexibility, and then adjust it. So my words were clarity, structure, adjustment. And then the final one that I had was like partnership. So making sure they're using, you know, whether it's their family, someone to voice it off, but more so an educated, licensed person to really like talk about what is my perspective, what do I want to do, what are my goals and aspirations, and how do I get there? And putting your money under the bed,
No.
or for that matter these days, just sitting it in a bank account is not necessarily the answer.
And it's also not educating your kids the right behaviours.
Yeah.
And it's an important thing for them because you want that next generation to do better.
Well, they all learn by a mirror, right?
That's right.
Yeah, absolutely. All right. Well, does anyone have anything they want to close off with before we wrap this up for today? Because it's definitely a very interesting topic. I feel like I've learned so much.
My biggest one is seek advice.
Yeah.
Get right advice. It's more cost effective to pay for the right advice than not getting advice.
I almost feel like I'd go a level up on that. It's not even seek advice, it's get a plan.
Get a plan.
Yeah.
Well, that's exactly what I wanted to add. I just don't want it to be all doom and gloom. You know, there are things you can do right now that can help you long term. So
Yeah.
seeking advice, putting right structure in place, having that right discipline in place,
Yeah.
very important.
Well, there's no way I'm living on 50 grand a year in retirement. So I need to think of something. What about you, David? My wise one.
Look, I'd say that generally, and this is reflecting comments from Ray and Ricky, is that people don't take enough risk, and I'm guilty of that as well. If you looked at my portfolio, you'd both faint and you'd give me a good talking to. But it's a very valuable step going to an advisor and making a plan. So to some extent that gets taken out of your hands a little bit. It's easier to have someone else telling you that than having to do it yourself. So.
Okay, well, thank you so much. So for today, it's been great. The first thing we're going to do after this meeting, David, we're going to make an appointment for you with Ray to look at your plan. And that is the
I know I need to do it, guys.
Exactly.
All of this tax saving advice sounds great at least, so I can get on that as a start.
Absolutely,
Yeah.
absolutely.
Yeah, general advice as quickly as it's the same day.
Exactly. So thank you so much for joining us. And that's us done.
Right, thank you.
Awesome. Buy now, pay later. Boom's dark side. How convenience culture is quietly destroying financial discipline. So on the next episode of the Wealth Guide podcast, we are going to explore the behavioural traps behind micro debt and how financial planning reinstates structure and long-term control in your spending.